Good evening, Don't Unfriend Me Nation. I think this is episode 488 or 87 or 79 or something like that. It's going to be up here. I'll get it in post. Like Bill O'Reilly said, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. If you haven't heard of Bill O'Reilly and his Do It Live segment, you should watch it. It's pretty funny. People say I'm angry during my live shows. The new format, we just did a show about how the LGBTQ community had really crossed the line. That show was done a couple days ago, and I like the format, just kind of doing it off the cuff, doing it like live, not writing a whole bunch. I can get pretty wordy anyway, and it doesn't help when I don't have kind of a syllabus or an agenda. But I think it's important to be a little bit more, I don't know, authentic and real. And when I write, I sometimes go into the days of yesteryear, and it sounds like I'm on parchment with iron gall ink, and it loses people. Some people love it; they love the History Channel. Other people are like, "Well, it's putting me to sleep." So we'll try to be a little bit more animated. We're talking about Joe Biden. We're talking about obviously that people have a lot to say about Trump. He's not a good guy. He's a horrible guy. He has mean tweets. He's sexist. He's homophobic. He's racist. All of these things are ridiculous. Sexism, I think Donald Trump gives what he gets. And I'm very much a garbage in, garbage out type of guy. If you come at me with positive motivations, I'm going to reciprocate. If you come at me with a negative attitude or try to be coy or aloof or obtuse, I'm going to give it to you just the same. And the reason why is, and pardon the expression, shit begets shit. And if you go digging for garbage, you're going to find it. And I think I'm acquiesced to people's requests. If you want to come here and wax intellect in a negative fashion, I'm more than welcome and honored to give you exactly what you're looking for. And if you want to go ahead and do it in a way that is more professional and respectful and mano a mano, or however you want to say it, fine. We can do that too. And I think, if you really want to go on the outside looking in, and you look at Democrats and you look at the way they see Republicans, there's this air of superiority that Democrats have towards Republicans. Now, a lot of this has to do with the brown-eyed, green-eyed, and blue-eyed people experiment, which some of you may have seen in the 60s and the 70s in regards to telling a classroom that green-eyed people were the smartest people and brown-eyed people were a little bit slower, and blue-eyed people were always more pragmatic and stood out of the fray of both groups. And when the teachers would say these things, you started to see these archetypes happen within the school, and the hierarchy was completely mixed. Popular kids are no longer popular. Green-eyed people were, looked at as a little bit not despised, but there was definitely trepidation. And the whole innocuous feeling of green-eyed people have it better because they're smarter. And the teacher would buy into that, obviously treating them better, make sure they, got to sit at the front of the class, or they were the first to go get their milk. Or, if there was praise, it was always for the green-eyed people. And when you were shunned or publicly ridiculed, it was always like, well, why can't you be more like Johnny, who is a green-eyed person, you brown-eyed or blue-eyed person? And it create dissension. Now, these experiments have been replicated throughout psychological papers and studies, and they've done it in mental hospitals, they've done it in the military, and ultimately you see that when you shovel enough BS, people tend to believe it. And the whole thing about the Democratic Party being the party of education, and they're college elites, and liberals go to have more schooling. Well, this is true, and Republicans are more blue collar, or they're middle of the road, or they're from the middle flyover states, and therefore they do the menial jobs. Is that you have this hierarchy, this mental stigma when it comes from the Democrats, and they believe this, and they treat Republicans like we're stupid. Now, that whole thing has been going on for a long time, but there's this new thing that if you believe in God, or you believe in religion, Christian, whatever your religious appetite may be, that somehow you're less of a person when it comes to the brain box and your IQ, because it takes a simpleton to believe that there's a guy in the sky, and they're turning this around. And when I hear the arguments from most liberals on Facebook or wherever I'm interacting or live, you'll hear people say, oh, well, how can I talk to an idiot? You believe in God. And my thought process is that it actually takes a very high level of intellect to move through so many things that are maybe materialistic limits or metaphysical limits, or science puts a capacitor on your faith where you doubt even more. And I think it takes a very high level of discipline and respect for not only the creator, but yourself, in order to maintain a religious relationship, whether that be through school, or whether it's in a church, or whether it's through a Bible, you in a home, or you just contemplating your thoughts in the middle of the night. Whatever that relationship looks like, I think it takes a high level of intellect, especially today, to maintain faith. So I challenge the Democrats on that premise. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, because inside of this egotism and this hierarchy, there also is a sense of, speaking of shit begets shit, well, that my crap doesn't stink. Is that I'm better than Republicans because I am a higher level thinker. I'm an intellectual. And I look at the intellectual minds like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and you can even look at Joe Rogan as an intellectual, because I believe he is. Look at Mike Rowe, look at Dave Chappelle, and then you can look on the other side, look at people like Bill Maher, and even Jake Tapper, who people tout as, an intellectual. But you look at some of the Democratic minds, and most of them are, in my opinion, are not intellectuals. They're very petulant. They're very stubborn. You look at the Young Turks with Cenk Uyghur, is just a giant man baby. And you see a higher level, in my opinion, of conversation and insight coming from conservatives than you do from the liberal minds. Now, the academia and the liberal elite tend to shut down conversation and dialogue because either A, they don't want to address it, or B, they don't have the ability to address it. And there's no clearer demonstration than the dichotomy between Trump and Biden. And even though there are similar lines of delineation between the two, and there's more common threads than you would think, depending upon which side of the aisle you're from, there is no clearer for a person who simply wants to stand back and observe the idiosyncrasies and the commonalities, and more importantly, the differentiation between the two, because that's what our vote should be decided on. Not how people are alike, but how they're different, and how that aligns with the ultimate goals of our society and our republic. But there are similarities, and the issue is this double standard. Joe Rogan said it best. I mean, he just flat out put the Democrats on blast last week and said, if Joe Biden was a Republican, they would be up his rear end nonstop, ad nauseum, 24/7, every day that ends with Y. And this is true. There are two videos that I want to show you, and everyone remembers these. One of them was probably one of the greatest one-liners in a debate outside of Mondale and Reagan, where Mondale was trying to hit Reagan on his age. And, Reagan, it was a presumptive argument, right? He didn't specifically say Reagan's too old. Reagan turned it around on him and said, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Walter, but I will not bring up how young you are and inexperienced, and just crushed him. And turned it around. And that was probably one of the biggest one-liners that really stuck with the American people about how clever and witty Ronald Reagan was. But Mondale just could not recover from that. And it was one of the most brilliant political blows we've seen in debate. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the B words, obviously. Bumbling backwater buffoon. But when you look at Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in this clip, you're going to see how less is sometimes more. And it's funny that we're 8 minutes in and I haven't even really gotten to the main point. But in this case, in the debate, Hillary Clinton goes on and on and on. And Donald Trump just absolutely shellacks her with a one-liner. And I want you to listen to this, because this really was the linchpin for Republicans and conservatives and moderates who did not like Hillary Clinton. And they knew that Donald Trump was going to come in and take it to her, and take it to the kind of the downtrodden parts of what's considered the swamp of Washington. And although he didn't get all of the things we wanted done, he did expose the liberal media and a lot of the swamp and what they were doing, especially inside the Department of Justice, weaponizing the IRS and some other things. But Hillary Clinton really sealed her fate. But the Democrats on their side, once again, seeing it from a different perspective, thought that this was the worst thing ever to happen outside of COVID that was coming a few short years later, because it's always the next crisis with them. It's not global warming today. It's aerosol cans. It's Freon. It's the panda bears. Oh no, it's the polar bears. No, it's the ice caps. No, it's murder hornets. It's always something with them. But the next big thing obviously would have been COVID. But at that time, their shout was democracy is in jeopardy because Donald Trump wants to lock up Hillary Clinton. Here's the video. Take a listen. And I think you'll put a smile on your face if you can go down memory lane with me. Here it is.
After getting the subpoena, you delete 33,000 emails. And then you acid wash them, or bleach them, as you would say, a very expensive process. So we're going to get a special prosecutor, and we're going to look into it. Because you know what? People have been... their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done. And it's a disgrace. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Secretary Clinton, I want to follow up on that. I'm going to let you talk about email.
Because everything he just said is absolutely false, but I'm not surprised. Really? In the first debate,
and the audience needs to calm down here.
I told people that it would be impossible to be fact-checking Donald all the time. I'd never get to talk about anything I want to do and how.
Now, when we listen to that, we'll come back to that video that we're going to show here in a few. There's a very large difference between that and what's happening with Donald Trump now in the cases that are rearing their ugly head at this opportune moment. I mean, talk about being just laced in serendipity. Well, how convenient that 15 months before the primary and the general elections that we see these cases that we've heard about since 2016. You remember several newspapers were like, well, we want to impeach Donald Trump 4 hours after he was sworn in. It's ludicrous. But there is a specific clip that I want to show you of Joe Biden, but the one that we just watched with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, this isn't the first time. You can go back all the way to the days of Aaron Burr, where there were verbal confrontations that happened between candidates. Several debates have gotten quite contentious over the years, and there's nothing wrong with that because where the rubber meets the road. But this was unique. Donald Trump didn't say, I'm going to throw you in jail, even though at his rallies it was lock her up and all this other stuff, and he ran on that. But you run on things that get you to the next level. For instance, Democrats are running on that our democracy is in jeopardy, and the Nazis are coming, and white supremacists are all over the place, including me because I'm one. I'm wearing a white shirt today. Oh, gosh. They've run on other things. They ran on the LGBTQ community in 2012 when Obama and Biden and Hillary Clinton and every other Democrat were shunning the LGBTQ community, and they were really catering to the religious vote. And that's been replaced now with a very large and very present younger generation and an LGBTQ community, which has quadrupled in size since that time. But if you go throughout history, McCarthy, they ran on that. They ran on the Reds, the communists were coming. They read on being an imperialistic war nation that did nation building with Vietnam. There's always the hot button topic. And Hillary Clinton being a robot / lizard / DuPont plastic type of candidate, and who had done some very serious things wrong in her time and her career, Donald Trump pointed that out and ran on it. But in no time did he say, these are the specific ways that I'm going to go ahead and make sure that Hillary Clinton will never have a chance to run or that she's in jail. This is also a time, just a couple of weeks before James Comey obviously closed down the case, reopened the case in October. This had a huge impact on the election, and the American people were very much making one blanket statement. We are not going to put Hillary Clinton in if she's going to be prosecuted or she has to be physically removed. We don't trust that situation. We're not going to put her in. the Democrats learned things. They also learned so much with the mail-in ballot system in the Democratic primaries. When Joe Biden was losing behind Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, and seeing that Michigan and Wisconsin went to a full mail-in ballot system, and they also saw during those primaries, because of COVID and because of sickness, they went ahead and sent out mail-in ballots without solicitation, which means that they didn't register. So they were mass sending out ballots in order to cover people who couldn't make it because of lockdowns and things to that effect. And they saw a very interesting turnout. And they saw the inside numbers of Biden not doing very, very well with multiple people on the ticket. In fact, he came in third in both Wisconsin and Michigan. When we got to the Carolinas, we saw a complete shift, which were more of standard regular voting. The black population came out, Kamala Harris was announced, and we saw Joe Biden do very, very well and ultimately propel to the front of the ticket. But they learned one thing, is that compared to the Republican primaries in both states, in the sense that Donald Trump was going to be the incumbent and the primaries were not done there, but they would still go ahead and have Republican-based primaries where you do local elections and things to that effect for local candidates, state representatives, and senators, is that they saw that the turnout for Democrats was much more favorable because of the mail-in ballots. And then hence the mass spamming of mail-in ballots in all 7 swing states that we saw. And you can say that that is illegal. You can say it's wrong. But what you can't say is that it wasn't opportune for Democrats to do so. They learned something from those primaries. We saw this again when it comes to how they're handling the 2024 election based upon the way that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton faced off, that a president who has legal concerns does not really stand a chance with the American people to be put in place. And I believe they're hedging their bets on this. So when you go back and you look at 16, the big reason Hillary lost was because of the investigations and the Comey investigations, email, Benghazi, and all of that stuff. Well, now you look at the litany of cases against Donald Trump, and all of a sudden it comes clear what the Democrats are doing. Bombard Donald Trump with the most frivolous amount of whatever you can throw at him. Throw the spaghetti at the wall. Give him 37 charges on an indictment for documents and multiple of the same type of charges, and just throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. We saw this in New York with the Bragg indictment. We're seeing it in Georgia. We know this with January 6th as they tried to make Donald Trump the master conspirator of overthrowing America's democracy. With this video, you're going to see something very different. Is Joe Biden specifically, he's not kidding. He's not being flippant. He's not trying to score political points. Very deliberately, he says the quiet part out loud. And this is what should be concerning to every single American, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. Watch this.
Conversation was tied to your predecessor, who is about to launch another campaign. So how do you reassure them, if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again.
The wording is so important, by legitimate efforts. Efforts. Since when does it take effort to apply guilt to somebody? Because shouldn't that be the natural progression of innocence? Innocence is applied to everyone who is accused of committing some sort of crime. At least it's supposed to be. The presumption of innocence is probably the one thing that differentiates the United States of America, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, and our freedoms. And freedom of speech is everywhere. Everyone says, oh, freedom of speech is unique to the United States. No, it's not. Freedom of speech is in most civilized countries. There are certain countries that say, like China, that has a constitution, that freedom of speech is paramount. And of course, they never do that. You get thrown into the gulag, or, excuse me, the Chinese prison. Then you go ahead and receive a 24-hour court appearance. And then you get on a firing squad, and the families of the loved ones receive the bill for the bullet. A little bit different. But most civilized countries have some sort of constitution or some sort of laws that protect speech. And so freedom really isn't about habeas corpus. It's not about being Mirandized. It's not about freedom of speech or having guns. All those things are important, and absolutely the quintessential pieces that identify freedom in the United States. But most importantly, is there is a presumption of innocence, and you don't apply guilt to your constituents or American citizens, no matter what, because then you're weaponizing, and then all those things can be removed. All those things can be taken away because they can take away your individual freedom and throw you in a cell. And then you can have all the speech you want while you're talking to a brick wall. You can have a gun if you want to and fire it inside that cell. But ultimately, your individual freedoms may still inherently be with you, but they can make it very difficult for you to express or utilize those freedoms in a productive way by removing you from the equation. This is why the presumption of innocence is so important. Now, Donald Trump being told that he can't run, and we're going to do whatever we can to stop him, it doesn't say specifically any crimes. It doesn't say specifically any charges. Joe Biden could have said, listen, Donald Trump's in some legal hot water. These things ultimately will pan out, and the Department of Justice will do accordingly what they need to. It's hands off for me. I'm not getting involved. But Joe Biden specifically took ownership that he, and they would use the Constitution to go ahead and limit Donald Trump's ability to run for president. And that is very different than saying we are going to hold him accountable for the things that he has done wrong, just like every person should be held accountable. But then what do? Well, you kind of go ahead and catch more than one fly. With that sticky substance, you're going to inadvertently catch other flies that could be Democratic opposition to Republicans who get caught when they do something wrong, i.e. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, his pay to play, things to that effect. So Joe Biden doesn't want to paint himself in the corner. He specifically was addressing Trump and using the Constitution and our efforts to make sure he doesn't get to run again no matter what. You remember just a few months before this was about 7 months ago in this clip, Joe Biden specifically talks about Ukraine, and they say, well, what are we going to do about Ukraine? What are we going to do about Russia? And he says, well, we'll stop Russia. Well, how are you going to do that, sir? He mentioned Nord Stream 2 and the pipeline. And the reporter challenged him and said, well, what do you mean Nord Stream 2? How is that going to happen? And he's like, trust me, we've got it under control. And then magically Nord Stream 2 gets blown up. Now, does that mean Joe Biden did it? Well, you have to ask yourself the question, either he is a prognosticator of Nostradamus's capabilities, or this guy likes to leak what he's going to do. We understand that he took credit and outed the SEAL teams for the Osama bin Laden capture while he was vice president. He has also leaked other things inadvertently. But Joe Biden is not a good man. Joe Biden is a plagiarist. Joe Biden is a chronic liar. Joe Biden has eulogized 4 Klan members, whether it be Byrd or Wallace or Thurman. And we can go on and on about the comments that he's made and the racial epitaphs he's made. But there is this double standard that Donald Trump is a racist, even though we have never heard him say anything that is racist that isn't taken out of context. Now, I will tell you, Donald Trump is abrasive. Donald Trump has made comments about Rosie O'Donnell. He's insulted mentally challenged reporters. But please understand, not before he was challenged. He went after Gold Star parents. We saw that. And even though Gold Star parents should not ever be attacked based upon the life of the child or loved one that was sacrificed, if they're being complete sanctimonious jerks, well, they're fair game. In my opinion, everybody's fair game. If you're going to question somebody's credibility and attack them, you have a right to be heard to defend yourself. Now, whether you like that or not, he said things about John McCain, but John McCain attacked him. I don't know what to tell you about Donald Trump. I'm not going to sit here and defend the way he acts. What I'm going to tell you is usually somebody comes and dishes it out and then can't take it when he throws it back at them. But it's deeper than this. If you look at the document scandal for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the similarities, once again, the sinew that ties them together are eerily similar. But the difference is that Donald Trump was the president of the United States in 4 years. Now, if you look at the photographs that were leaked from Donald Trump, you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of boxes. And then if you look at Joe Biden, there's rumored to be, thousands of boxes as well. But when you look at any of the photographs from Joe Biden's house or the university or former workplace, there are no photos. There's nothing. But with Donald Trump, you see a litany of boxes and leaked photos from a grand jury indictment that was sealed long before the indictment was opened and released. The question is why? Why is there a double standard? Joe Biden took documents home. We've looked at Donald Trump's overall inventory list that the FBI produced that shows what was confiscated. And if you break that all down, there were thousands of newspaper clippings, entire newspapers, photographs, magazines and journals, so many pieces of paper that had nothing to do, tens of thousands of documents that were not classed in any way, shape, or form. And if you look at it, there was about 150 documents. Most of those were confidential, which is hardly anything. A toilet paper requisition is confidential if you send it between two government agencies. But you're really looking not even at the secret stuff. It's top secret and SCI. That is the most paramount and critical to our nation's confidence. Joe Biden had those documents. Hillary Clinton's lawyers scrubbed and looked at those documents. So did Joe Biden's lawyers. He shared that information inadvertently with his legal team, who did not have top secret clearances. He was asked 5 times to produce all the documents. The first time he said, that's all I got. Second time, that's all we got. Third time, that's all we got. Fourth time, hello. And then they just found some a few months ago in Boston. Donald Trump, most assuredly, and I want to be clear, broke the law. The extent of that, whether it's a parking ticket or a jaywalking ticket or first-degree murder, is yet to be established. I will tell you this, Joe Biden did the exact same thing, but Joe Biden's scope of responsibility as a senator, as a vice president, these were in his home for decades. Some of it was new when he was a VP, some of it when he was a senator, some when he was not even in government. These things have to be a concern. You can look at Afghanistan and his withdrawal from Afghanistan, where he left weapon systems behind. The newspaper absolutely lambasted Donald Trump in Syria and withdrawal from there and leaving weapon systems behind, even though there was this slash and burn agriculture, civil war type style that the chiefs of staffs did and the Joint Chiefs did to direct the military to destroy the Humvees, destroy choppers, and left very little in Syria, even though the media went ahead and just shellacked him for that. Joe Biden didn't do that. There are working, operating Black Hawk helicopters, Humvees, weapon systems, infrared technology. There are biosystems that actually recognize biometrics from eyesight and thumbprint scanners and databases of all the NGOs who were in Afghanistan, which put our intelligence apparatus at risk. And most importantly, the people who helped us and assisted us, who were local for more than 20 some odd years. We understand that the 13 veterans who ultimately lost their lives because he put in charge the Taliban. Remember the Taliban, who are throwing acid on women's faces and reducing education for females and children who live under the thumb of terrorist opportunities and tyrannical rule from the Taliban, are protecting the exfil of American citizen and NGOs. And then we had people that were released from Bagram Air Base who actually conducted the bombing that took place that took those 13 lives. The Bagram Air Base was closed 30 days before as they exfilled. He lied and told them that told everybody on stage that the chiefs of staff and the Joint Chiefs did not tell him that Afghanistan was going to fall to the Taliban and the regulars of the Afghan army were not going to stand firm. He did quid pro quo with the Afghani president and said, if you don't go ahead and do it this way, A, B, and C, we're going to pull intel and air support, which they did, and lost the country in a matter of hours, what took us 21 years to establish and give up so many lives. It was a 100% muddled exfil. A year before, when Donald Trump actually negotiated the ceasefire and American lives were saved, we saw northern Afghanis and southern Afghanis dropping and laying down their weapons at the first sign of conflict with Taliban, going into Kyrgyzstan and other places. These type of things were all laid out and we all saw. But Joe Biden wasn't held accountable. The double standard that you see for the pay to play and quid pro quo, or taking money from China and redistributing it to his entire family, which there's actual evidence of this. It's not fake. It's not the Hunter Biden laptop has Joe Biden's name on it, has monies that were transferred from Burisma. We heard him on tape blackmail in Ukraine and the leaders of the Ukraine to fire the prosecutor for $1 billion. And if they didn't do it, they weren't getting the money. You have specific situations which at least deserve the same level of scrutiny that Donald Trump has went under, yet we hear nothing. This is the big problem, and this is the issue that people are taking. It's not that we want Donald Trump protected and bulletproof, Teflon Don. If Donald Trump is guilty, and when it looks to this new indictment, when it comes to these documents, obstruction of justice took place. He was ordered to do something. They're the people's documents. I understand people think, oh, well, I listened to some podcast with Patel on it, and he says ultimately that Donald Trump can declassify anything he wants, which is not true. And the only thing I can tell you is, if you remember, a couple of years before Donald Trump left office, he was looking to release the classified 2032 release, top secret, of John F. Kennedy's assassination. These were the holdover for Jackie Onassis, the holdover documents. And there was about, 14,000 documents that were not released, and the Warren Commission sealed them. Donald Trump, if he could just declassify anything he wanted, he would have. And he said he was going to. And then the kibosh was put on that by the DOJ because it wasn't redacted. Now, these were released recently, but it took over 2.5 years to redact these documents and make sure that the sources were protected. Essentially, the government whitewashing it so it's innocuous and doesn't hurt anybody who's currently no longer in power but may still be alive. The whole point is, and I know I'm all over here because I'm trying to give you just a taste of the frustration from Republicans and conservative minds who simply want the same level of government and the same level of standard for everybody. If you're going to put Donald Trump on trial for the rest of his life because he wants to run for president in 2024, that's fine. That's your choice. But please understand, the same level of scrutiny, the same level of dignity needs to be applied to everyone in Washington, not just Donald Trump. Democrats are truly creating a two-tiered system of justice in our country, and it's abhorrent. It's unacceptable. There should be a level of standard that is applied to Donald Trump that Joe Biden also receives. The last bit of information that I'll give you, just another example, and I have hundreds. I mean, we can talk about this on the live show, is look at the way that Joe Biden, his search warrants to his properties and businesses took place. There were phone calls ahead of time, 8 hours of notice. They actually moved one and rescheduled, so the lawyers had more time to go through it. They all, played tiddlywinks and had coffee cake and sank a coffee at the coffee table, and everyone had a good time, and the FBI took pictures and everything else. Donald Trump had black vans, full tactical gear, armed weaponry. Donald Trump was not allowed there. His legal counsel wasn't allowed there. There are rumors that they were inside, Melania's changing room looking and searching. They had already had a full account of what documents were there back in February. They already knew what they were looking for. All of these things. More importantly, taking his passport. You don't do that to somebody who isn't charged with a crime. These things are personal. They don't like Donald Trump. And that is something that Democrats should say. Like I said, it's okay to do this on the up and up. It's okay to do this above board. It's okay to investigate him if he broke the law, and he should be held accountable. But this is weaponization, and every single person knows it. The timing of it alone, with the E. Jean Carroll case, with Bragg coming out and indicting him, with Georgia indicting, J6 standing in line. It reminds me of the movie Airplane, where the person's sitting in the seat and she's going crazy and everybody, slaps her to try to get her to come back and be coherent. And then behind Leslie Nielsen, who's the doctor who tries to slap her back to coherence, there's people with pipes and boxing gloves and grenades and baseball bats. And there's just a long line of people that want to take their shot. This is Donald Trump. He is a proverbial punching bag for the Democrats. Everything is his fault. They're going to ensure that he can't run because they're going to inundate him and keep him completely underwater with legal specific targeting that has nothing to do with what the country needs right now. The country needs healing. The country needs specific direction from somebody who knows what they're doing. We've seen what Donald Trump can do. We've seen the numbers he can produce. And the Republicans truly either need to understand, they either need to shit and get off the pot when it comes to Donald Trump, or they need to give him a full-throated, 100% shoulder-to-shoulder, guaranteed, steadfast resolve. And we just saw yesterday that Adam Schiff, 20 Republicans jumped ship and did not charge him with censure and the fine that would have actually removed him from office, and they buckled. This is what we've come to expect from the Republican Party. This is what we've come to expect from the Democratic Party, and this is why so many people are frustrated. That was a long one. I warned you. These seem to be about 30 minutes. Watch it in the segments that you want. Either way, please like, share, follow, subscribe. Let me know what you think down below. There was a lot here. I would appreciate it if you would tell me your thoughts. God bless. I will see you tomorrow, Friday night at 8:30 with Olivia, Leroy, Amy, and I will be doing a live show. We'll see you then. And until then, take care of each other. Good night.
I'm David Boreanaz with the Cast of SEAL team, and we have an important message for returning vets.
We want you to know if you're struggling to cope, there's help and it's just a phone call away.
The Veterans Crisis Line is staffed with experienced professionals who know your struggles.
There's no greater sacrifice in service to our country. We're able to enjoy our freedoms because of it.
Your service is important. You are important.
For vets and their families, the Veterans Crisis Line is here to help 24 hours a day. Please call.